Welcome to the Strokecast. A Generation X stroke survivor explores rehab, recovery, the frontiers of neuroscience, and how to peel a banana with one hand.
Hello, I'm Bill Monroe, and welcome to episode 18 of the Strokecast. A few days ago, I was working on the exercise bike I have in the middle of my living room because, recent studies have shown that working out on an exercise bike has been shown to have significant improvements for balance and gait for stroke survivors dealing with hemiparesis. And sure, it's there. I may as well use it. And I had the difficulty of this exercise bike set for 5. And as I'm riding along or sitting there and just sort of pedaling and not going anywhere, my affected leg, knee, and hip started bothering me a little bit. I figured I was probably going to have to cut this workout short because, the point is to go ahead and do the exercise without actually damaging the joints. But before I did that, I turned up the difficulty a little bit just to see if I could even do it. And what I found when I turned up the difficulty from a 5 to a 7 was that the pain went away. It actually got a lot easier to do the exercise. I'm not entirely sure what the mechanism there was. Maybe at the easier level, I had too much slack, or maybe I had too much speed, or there wasn't enough resistance to provide feedback to my left leg as I was cycling on there. But the lesson I took away from that was that keeping things easy and making things easy isn't necessarily easy. It can cause more pain, and it can be less effective in the long term. Because the things that we are dealing with are hard. They are difficult. And it requires us to go out and put in a lot more effort than we would like. But putting in that effort and reaching beyond what we think might be easy or what we think we might be able to do today, that's how we're able to grow and improve. And so today I want to talk about doing the hard things to get better. And it's not just the physically hard stuff like using more strength to pedal, but a lot of times it's the emotionally hard stuff, because that's the stuff that is often the toughest to deal with. I may be speaking a bit in platitudes here, but they are platitudes that I find helpful, that keep me working and hopefully growing and, recovering. See, growth and recovery do not happen in our comfort zone. That's not where we acquire new skills or abilities. Sitting still and hoping and doing it the easy way is not what's going to get my limbs back. It's not what's going to rewire my brain in the positive way that I want to rewire my brain. My very first day in the inpatient ward at the hospital, they gave me a wheelchair, and then they promptly had me get out of the wheelchair in my very first PT session to stand up between the parallel bars when there was no way I could actually physically accomplish that yet. My legs were just not responding. But they had me doing that anyway and supporting me. And later in the day, they had me up against the wall using a rail on the side of the hallway to, again, try just walking a few more steps. Right from the very beginning, it was my job to do the hard work to try and get better, to push beyond what I was initially capable of. Because it's reaching beyond that comfort zone, reaching beyond the relative safety of that wheelchair. And I don't just mean physical safety, I mean the emotional safety of not having to risk failure. But it's reaching beyond that safety that was where I could start beginning to learn how to walk again. There's a common motivational poster out there that you'll see in malls and offices and internet memes across the country and around the world. And it's a picture of a ship out on the ocean. And it says that ships are safest in the harbor, but that's not what ships are built for. The point is, you can be in that comfort zone, in that comfortable space, and minimize any risks that you're going to encounter, because that ship leaving the harbor and going out onto the open seas is going to face more risks. It is going to face more challenges, but that's what it's there for. That's why it exists. And that's sort of the theme behind that poster, is that when we stay just in our comfort zone, just in our harbors, we may be safe, but that's not ultimately what we were built for or made for. And I would actually take it a step further here. And this is one of those things that becomes really evident when we look at what we might consider to be our comfort zone following stroke. And that's some information that actually comes from the U.S. Navy. U.S. Navy, of course, has some of the toughest ships in the world. The ones best able to withstand a storm and withstand everything things can throw at it. You would think that the harbor, they would be practically impenetrable. But the Navy's Fleet Weather Center says it's safer for a ship to be out at sea than in port during a hurricane. They do a lot of research because sending a ship out to sea is costly. And so that's why they monitor the weather constantly and train and practice in order to make the right decision about when to kick those ships out of the harbor. Because when things really go wrong, when the storm really does hit, being in that comfort zone can be the worst place it can be. Getting better following stroke requires taking risks and going beyond what's easy. It's so easy and simple to skip the exercises, or not to go out and try walking further, or not to constantly work to flip a light switch with an affected hand and fail again, and fail some more. It is so easy to skip that stuff. But it doesn't help. And it doesn't force those brain cells to rewire and reroute. They will do what we let them do and what we repeatedly do. If we lock into unhelpful patterns, those brain cells will lock into those patterns too. And the brain will gradually lose more and more contact with an affected limb or an affected skill. The brain and rewiring will always take the easiest and most common way out and will reinforce that. It's one more reason why comfort zones can be so insidious. You see, neuroplasticity doesn't kick in as soon as we have a stroke. Neuroplasticity is an ongoing thing in the human brain. The human brain is always rewiring itself and reinforcing new connections and letting older connections pass by the wayside. I mean, sure, the brain has to really step up the neuroplasticity following a stroke when it has to route around a big damaged segment. But it's always doing that. And the data we continue to feed our brain informs those connections that it's building. Learning and growing requires putting ourselves out there. When I talk about going beyond my comfort zone, it reminds me of a common experience on the Joko cruise that I talked about in one of my earlier episodes. The thing about a lot of the attendees of this annual event is that we have a very high mix of introverts and shy folks. Those are not necessarily the same thing in this group. And in many cases, I've approached it as, well, I am more than happy to engage with folks and talk to folks. And I want to talk to folks, but I really don't want to go up to folks and bother them or interrupt them in some way, because that would seem awkward. But anybody who wants to talk to me, absolutely, we are set to go. Here's the thing, though. When you've got hundreds of people who are approaching it exactly the same way, what ends up happening is you end up with a lot of people who have no one to talk to because they're waiting for somebody else to talk first and to introduce themselves first. And of course, online, we are an incredibly talkative and chatty bunch. But that in-person thing really challenges our comfort zones. But what I have found is that when I'm willing to go ahead and take that risk, which is really, I'm finding a more and more mild risk all the time, and actually go up and talk to somebody and say hello and introduce myself and comment on a nerdy t-shirt or something like that, the response is always positive. It has never worked out negatively for me. Opening up and reaching out, going beyond my comfort level in that context, has never steered me wrong. And what I'm finding in my recovery is that going out and trying stuff, not taking stupid safety risks, but going out and pushing myself and trying harder and failing and failing and failing and then not failing so much, and then failing a little bit less at the task and a little bit less and a little bit less, and finally accomplishing the task in a sloppy way, and then gradually getting better and better and better is sort of the path to recovery. It's not fast and it's not easy, but it's a path that'll get me there. And of course, as I'm talking about all this, I'm not letting the able-bodied and able-brained folks out there off the hook, because taking risks is not limited to survivors. In some respects, taking risks may be easier for us since we've already survived our own blood trying to kill us, but everyone still needs to be able to do the work to reach beyond the comfort zone if they want to grow. And this applies to all growth in life. Because as I said, neuroplasticity doesn't start with stroke. It's a mechanism that works on us all the time. And so if we want to grow and accomplish things, whether that's to write a book or pursue a promotion or to get into or out of that relationship with somebody, it's sometimes necessary to go ahead and do the hard work and try those things that make us feel uncomfortable to get out of that comfort zone. One of the things that I've had up on my wall at various points in my life is another one of those common internet quotes you'll see from time to time. And that's, if you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got. Making those changes and going beyond the things we're comfortable with are how we're able to grow and achieve and do more and try more things and get more things that we want out of life. And that doesn't mean we have to do huge risks of moving across the country or turning our lives completely upside down. You know, in the case of stroke survivors, maybe that is as simple as wanting to get rid of an AFO or a cane. And the first thing I say is go ahead and work with your therapists and let them know that that is your goal. Maybe it means during some of those exercises in therapy that try out your skills here. You've got to go backwards and put on that gait belt again. Or maybe that means and maybe trying some of that at home. Maybe if you don't know if you can walk without your cane, maybe it's time to try it while walking around your bed so that if you do fall, you fall into someplace safe and comfy. You know, you don't have to take dangerous risks, but you do sometimes have to go ahead and risk failure. Because failure is always a possibility. It is always an option when trying to grow and trying to go beyond the comfort zone, because sometimes we will fail and it's okay to fail. It's important to make sure that the risks we are taking are sensible ones, and maybe that means trying new exercises and new tasks around other folks in case something goes wrong, or if you're alone, calling or texting a friend before you try something, and again afterwards they know you've completed it safely, and if they don't hear from you, maybe then they go and check up on you. But if you don't fail sometimes, it means you're not trying hard enough. We have to be willing to push ourselves beyond what is comfortable, because that is where recovery and growth happens. It's at the edges. It's at the margins. One of my physical therapists said that when they talked with new PTs, they advised them that if you don't have one patient fall a year, you're probably not pushing your patients hard enough. No one wants to fall, but avoiding all risks is not the way to do it. Keeping those ships in the harbor is not going to help anyone. One of the things that is so important for growth, and really for life it seems to be, is for us to have something to do. Anecdotally, we hear so many stories of people who die or have a stroke or have a heart attack within a year of retirement, because suddenly, after decades, they have nothing to do. And having nothing to do is poison for the human spirit. We are not human beings. We are actually human doings. And stroke survivors need to be cautious, because many times if we lose our jobs or are not able to job hunt or have more trouble getting out of the home or doing other hobbies and things like that in the home, it's very easy to find that we have nothing to do except sit there and try to recover, and just sitting still and not doing anything is not going to help with recovery. Sometimes the main benefit of our home PT, OT, and speech exercise programs is just that it gives us a reason to get out of bed every day and go do something, and do something that's on that list. So if this comfort zone is so dangerous, why do we get stuck in it? There are lots of reasons that pop up from time to time. The first is that, hell, it's so comfortable. It can be so easy to not try and to be satisfied with where we are, or to think that that's all we deserve. It can be so tempting to simply stop failing. And it's not easy to go beyond that because, again, that comfort zone can be quite comfortable. And there are any number of reasons why it is so difficult to break out of that and to get out of that, including things like depression, which is a common condition that stroke survivors often have to deal with. And the thing about depression is that it lies to us. It gives us bad data. And it can be very difficult to try and take the right actions for us when that action ends up being based on bad data. Our personal identity and how we see ourselves also plays into some of these challenges. Because your personal identity really influences and governs all the different things that we do in our lives. How do I see myself? Do I see myself as someone who can learn and grow and change? Or do I limit myself? See, we always drive to act in ways that are consistent with the character of how we see ourselves, even if we don't like that character. But here's the thing. Characters are fictional. They're the product of a novelist or a marketing customer segmentation meeting. We write our own characters for ourselves based on the facts we see around us, whether or not we perceive those facts correctly. There are two different ways I could actually go ahead and describe myself. I can describe myself as a Gen X stroke survivor, freelance trainer, speaker, and writer, and a content producer working to connect others in the stroke community through the power of storytelling. Or I can describe myself as a middle-aged, unemployed, brain-damaged cripple. Which of those two guys do you want to hang out with? Which one do you think will be more successful in life? Which one is more likely to change their life for the better? You see, they're the same guy. Both definitions come from the same set of facts. And it's not always easy. But personally, I choose to be character one. I choose to act in ways consistent with being character one. I choose to try new things or to use my affected hand to open doors. I choose to turn up the difficulty level on that exercise bike. And that brings me to our hack of the week. This week, it's kind of a twofer. You see, I love paper books. I love the feel of them, the look of them, the comfort they give me when they're sitting on my shelves in the wall, the smell of them, how my hands could turn pages. I have over 1,000 books in my personal library in my apartment. And of course, there's been a recent influx of books related to neuroplasticity, stroke, and TBI. The problem is, it's tough to read a book after stroke. Pre-stroke, I was probably going through 2 books a month. Afterwards, it's a lot slower. The problem is, I have one hand that I have to use to hold the book, to hold it open, and to try and turn the pages, because the left hand doesn't do that stuff yet. And that's difficult, especially when I have to keep a book wide open if it's one that wants to close itself, or have to turn the book 90 degrees to try and turn the page without losing my place. So, in order to try and solve this, I decided I was going to try my girlfriend's Kindle because I learned I could check out books from the Seattle Library. You see, I've avoided ebooks in the past because, despite my natural affinity for nearly all things electronic, I really like the sensory experience of the Dead Tree editions. And I loved to read them, and it was just a great overall experience. But now I needed to try something else. So I began playing with the Kindle and trying to read on that, and found that, yeah, that experience does physically work a lot better. It's lightweight, so I can hold it in my one hand, and I can simply press a button with my thumb to change pages. And when I want to do book reviews, it's a lot easier to flag passages and copy sections out for notes. But I still have all of these books on my shelves, and I don't want to go ahead and buy separate Kindle editions. And that's where the Seattle Public Library comes in. And really, most major libraries these days offer this service. And that's that I can go onto the library's website. I don't even need to actually go to the physical library, and I can browse the collection. And they have an awful lot of ebooks and Kindle books in the Seattle Public Library collection. I can browse through them, and I can even find electronic versions of the paper ones that are on my shelves and just choose to check them out from the electronic library and download them to the Kindle, so I don't have to pay twice for something I already own. I don't have to make that trip down to the library. And now I have that book on the Kindle, and in 3 weeks or 6 weeks if I renew it, it will simply disappear and be returned to the library. So if you like to read and find it difficult post-stroke, go ahead and check out the Kindle. In addition to being more easy to manage physically, the ability to change font size and text size may make it easier for those who are working with some visual processing challenges as well. Plus, it can also read the book to you using its own computerized voice. So there's some really cool things happening in there. And check out your local library and see if you can check out books online straight to an electronic reader. So that's it for this week. How do you try to stretch beyond your comfort zone? Or how do you define yourself in your post-stroke world? Tell us in the comments over at 2minutetalktips.com/comfort. Do you have a story of your experience as a stroke survivor, caregiver, or professional that you'd like to share in a future episode? Please let me know. I am Bill at strokecast.com. Make sure to share this episode with someone that you think may find it helpful. And, as always, don't get best, get better. Thanks a lot, and I'll talk to you next week.
The Strokecast, Bill Monroe, and Bill's guests provide general information and entertainment, not medical advice. Please do not make any changes to your treatment plan or the execution of your treatment plan without first consulting your personal doctor or medical team. The Strokecast is a proud production of the Currently Speaking Podcast Network.